Okay, we're gonna open the meeting. We'll do the pledge of allegiance, 5 moment of silence. Mr. Brockman.
Flags over this way.
Oh, you moved it on. It's been that way for 8 years. Already? You're not even out yet.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Something a little nicer in the middle than just the thermometer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You get two flags.
You gotta have a seal of something.
Yeah, something, put something there, please.
You know.
Picture myself
It's a hearing of citizens. Anybody like to speak for 3 minutes? Not seeing anybody? Facilities update? Mr. Brockman.
So at our last meeting, we were talking about the construction that is going to be happening at Erie High and Collegiate Academy, and we were talking about some of the energy-saving initiatives that could be going on. And so I just wanted to bring everybody this list so that you know exactly what those things are that are actually going to be done to Erie High and Collegiate Academy, and then the difference between the work that is going to happen versus going through an energy savings grant option. And I'm not going to read through the list. You have it there. If you have any questions, you can ask. But I know that the biggest difference between going through an energy savings or an ESCO type project versus the way that we're doing it is that for the most part, the ESCO projects are retrofitting new devices into old infrastructure. And with what we're doing at Erie High, we're redoing the infrastructure. So it doesn't really fit. The two ideas don't really mesh well together.
But if it did, it would be, money would be available. I mean, are we missing out on money by, I'm not criticizing the decision to do it.
The way those programs are funded is by taking the energy savings you realize and using it to pay the debt service. So by doing it this way, we're still going to realize the energy savings, but we're going to be able to finance it with a much lower rate through our bond issue.
Briefly explain variable frequency drone.
So the heating and cooling units that are up on the roof, instead of it being either an all-on or an all-off, it varies between how much it's powering. So when you don't need it to run fully, it won't run fully.
Thank you.
Mr. Brockman, can you update the board on some of the questions from last week to the solar panels?
Oh, yes.
Stadium maintenance room and the Erie High steps?
Yes, I most certainly will. So I'll start with the last two. The room at the stadium, we're going to have our painters come in and paint the walls. It'll have to be next spring, so we'll get it cleaned out, and we'll put a nice coat of paint on there. The steps at Erie High, the bricklayers will be doing as soon as it hits spring and we're able to actually do it. Our guys, our tradespeople can actually do those two things as well. As far as the solar panels are concerned, the company that installed them was at Erie High, at Collegiate this week. The plan is, because they seem to still be all intact, the plan is to actually take them down and then put them throughout the district where we have the school gardens. And we'll use those to power lights that go around the garden. And so it'll be a big STEM area. So we know that those solar panels don't have enough juice to really do any true energy savings for us, but we do want to keep them around, and we want them to be used as an educational tool.
I think that's a fine idea.
Anybody have anything else? If not, we'll move on. Okay, custodial RFP.
So we've been moving along with the RFP process, and we are on track to actually issue the RFP later this week. We had two very productive meetings with the RFP committee, which included stakeholders from across the district, including representatives from Local 95 and Local 1968. I think their input through the process was very valuable, and I think in the long run, once we get the RFPs back, it'll put them in a much better position to respond to any type of savings as we continue to work through the process. You do have a draft of the RFP at your place tonight, and Neil's going to review some of the major sections of the document.
So again, Brian said the committee met twice. We took all of the input from the committee members and put it back into the RFP. So we tried to listen to what everybody had to say. It is set up as a RFP would be. Table of contents on there, and it'll tell you each of the sections and what each thing is talking about. The highlights are that this is for a 3-year contract with 2 one-year options that the district would have. We decided through talking with the committee that we would maintain ownership of the machines, and we wouldn't basically dump the entire thing and have the company bring in new ones. We put in provisions for the buying of chemicals where it would be the vendor will buy them, but we have a provision in there that if it's advantageous for us, then we will continue to buy the chemicals, the cleaning supplies. As far as the duties, the cleaning frequencies and the custodial duties and the custodial supervision duties, those lists were compiled and reviewed at least a dozen different times by both custodians and engineers, so we feel that it does a decent job of capturing everything that our staff in the buildings are actually doing. The rubric is on page 39. So that's going to be the evaluation criteria, and everybody who is on the committee is going to be part of that evaluation once they're all returned to us. The important dates to remember, hopefully we're releasing it tomorrow. We will be requiring a mandatory pre-bid meeting in November, which will also include tours of the buildings. And then the bids are due back on January 6th.
Neil, you lost me when you said a 3-year proposal, 2 one-year options. How is that? I don't know, actually, that 1 year for what?
So the original contract, if this goes through and the board votes to outsource the custodians, it will be for a 3-year contract. At the end of that 3rd year, the board would then vote to add a 4th year to it, and then the same thing for a 5th year.
Okay, I had misunderstood. I thought you meant during the 3-year
No.
period.
Sorry.
Be nicer if those years were in the front, and just saying, if you want a 3-year contract, if you went for the first year, they had to take the vote, and then the second year, take the vote, and then once you knew that you were heading in the right direction, you could give them a 3-year contract, but you're giving them a 3-year contract right off the bat.
We do have it's a 90-day out clause in there for non-performance, so that if we do determine even in the first year that they're not performing where we need to, that we can terminate.
Okay. Financial results, Mr. Polito?
At your desk tonight, you do have a summary of our financial results for the 2018-19 school year. If you take a look at the overall results, we're comparing it to the projected results that we presented to you back in April as part of the budget process. And at that time, we were estimating a $4.2 million surplus. You can see from this summary that we actually came in with a $12 million surplus. And there's variances for both the revenues and expenses listed down below. Just like to point out, when we look at the revenues, that we were about $4 million over what we budgeted. That's about a 2% variance from where we were back in April. And our expenditures are $3.8 million under what we budgeted, which is a 1.9% variance. As far as the major revenues, you can see the top 3. The first one is medical access subsidy. We had some more money available in that account this year, and we're able to pull that down. That's not a recurring revenue. The same with the delinquent real estate taxes. The reason that was higher is because of the consolidation we did with the tax cycle 2 years ago. That pushed through a little earlier than we anticipated. And then the insurance proceeds were something that were unanticipated with the fire number 2 at Erie High School. On the expense side, you can see that our major variances were salaries and benefits, specifically our medical insurance. We looked at that with PFM, and we feel that the medical insurance, there's a portion of that that is going to be recurring savings and a portion that isn't. We just happen to have a pretty good year as far as claims go. And the salaries, a big chunk of that we also feel is going to be recurring. So looking at this, although we do have a pretty significant surplus this year, the vast majority of that really is turning out to be more one-time money, not recurring. So we have, on the second page, we did have PFM update the projections based on these results. The second page is actually the August 2nd, 2019 results. This is before we had the final numbers for 2018-19, and you can see in year 5 and 2024-25, before we had these results, we were estimating, and this assumes a 2.6% tax increase every year, that we stabilize charter enrollment at 30 students leaving each year and outsource our custodians and engineers, that in the last year we were still looking at a $1.8 million deficit. So turn to the last page, and this is the update taking into consideration what we've determined with PFM are the recurring savings as a result of the surplus this year. Same exact scenario throughout with the charter stabilization, the outsourcing, and the 2.46% tax increase. You can see that $1.8 million deficit was reduced to $264,000, which is a positive. We still have that deficit in year 5, but that will give us some time to address it. If that does play out, then in that year we're looking at a tax increase that's closer to 3% rather than the 2.46. So that it is very good news, but just like we reported a month ago, as S&P has said, we need to get through another year or two to determine for sure where we're at with our finances, and for me the most significant decision that's coming up here is the outsourcing. One way or another, we need to make sure that we realize about $1 million in savings to make this work.
Any questions?
Questions?
Not seeing any. Bond refunding, Mr. Boydo.
Okay. With the $12 million, mostly one-time surplus in mind, I just want to revisit our proposal to refund the 2012 bond issue. That's the sale-leaseback transaction. This is the final, I guess I would say, unconventional debt instrument on our books as a result of the financial crisis for the last 10 years. These bonds are not callable for another 2 years, but we're allowed to, at this point, issue another bond issue and put money into an escrow account to pay those bonds for the next 2 years until they're callable, and then refund them. And if you recall, we were looking at possibly doing that bond refinancing and saving about $400,000. In order to do that, if you look at this first page, I have it highlighted, we would have to deposit $8 million into an escrow to pay those bonds. And again, the proposal at that point was to issue new bonds to pay for that. But given the fact that we do have this surplus this year and the majority of it is one-time money, I'd like to recommend tonight that instead of issuing new bonds, that we just pay these off, that we pay the $8 million. If you go back to page 4, you can see these bonds are currently on our books until 2031. The total outstanding principal is $7.4 million, but we're scheduled to pay another $2.6 million in interest if we do continue on with these bonds. If we were to refund them, we would basically be paying another $2 million roughly of interest. So if you look at the $8 million transfer that we would have to do to pay these bonds off, If we did that instead of doing the refunding with the new issue, we would save the district about $2 million over the next 12 years.
And that's not, okay. Is everybody okay with that? Anybody have any questions on that? If not, I'd suggest that we put it on for next week to pass. I think it's something we should do. We already discussed it once, but does anyone have a problem with that?
do we have any concerns that we might need that money that we're putting in into escrow for if something catastrophic that happens?
We still are maintaining, at this point, an $8 million
Okay,
fund
as long as
balance.
we still have our $8 million
If you
fund
look at
balance.
the projections on the 10/31/19 update, we're still scheduled throughout that to have some surpluses. Again, they're declining every year, but we're transferring those to capital projects. So at this point, with this will give us, by the end of this year, we'll have enough money to fund phase 1 of our finance, or our facilities program. And then whatever we are able to transfer in future years will set us up for the next phase. Just one other thing I'd like to point out on this, if we do this refunding, that it will realize for the next 12 years about $900,000 in savings in our budget. And initially, I was thinking that we could use that to help balance our budget in the short term. But if you go to the very last page of this debt handout, and this is something that PFM did point out to us, our debt service right now is running about $11.8 million a year, and that runs through 2034. And the way the state likes us to do debt service is to maintain level payments throughout. So whenever we have peaks or valleys in our debt service payments over the life of our outstanding bonds, they want us to go back through and wrap the new debt service around that so it's level throughout. So if you look at where we are, again, we're at about $11.8 million through 2033. The 2012A, the ones that we're talking about paying off, are basically paid off in 2031. But you see, as soon as they're paid off, our debt service from our other bond issues increase to take our total debt service payment to $11.8 million. So although this is a longer-term savings, it's not a permanent savings. So if we don't set that money aside somehow in 2031 and 2032, whoever's sitting at this table, probably not too many of us, but we'll have to come up with $900,000 to pay the increased debt service. So at this point, their recommendation, and I believe it's a sound one, if we do this, to transfer that $900,000 of savings into capital projects, so that we can use that for our capital projects, and then that will block out a chunk in the budget to ensure that when the time comes, if the next board or next several boards are fiscally responsible and maintain that, the money will be there to pay for that increase without a tax increase.
So, Mr. Wagner, would you have to write a resolution or something?
I believe we have one prepared just in case you would agree.
That's what I'm asking. Okay.
Don't be having nothing ready already. So we make sure we want to do it.
I like to be prepared in case.
All right.
Okay.
Don't be assuming anything.
Charter school evaluation policy, Mr. Brockman.
So at your table, there's, this is the framework that we would like to use to evaluate all of the brick and mortar charter schools which are in Erie. As I've said to you guys all before, this was adapted from the Philadelphia framework. The governance and the financial aspects of which are embedded in this document were still applicable to what we do here. The biggest change for us came on the front end as far as the academics. The academic side of the Philadelphia framework, because they have so many charter schools, they wound up comparing charter schools to similar charter schools. We don't have that kind of a population. So we downsized it to, or we right-sized it to Erie, where what we're going to be doing is comparing each of the individual brick and mortar charter schools to the district average for what our buildings are able to do. And you can read through it when you have more time. But the categories are proficiency, growth, attendance, and then post-secondary readiness. Those are the big things that we found in looking at how we're evaluating all the schools. Those are the things that we think have to be in there. This hits pretty much all of the things that we need to be looking at. It's also information that can be readily available through PVAS and PSSA scores and PA Future Ready Index. And so it's not a lot of things that we would really have to ask for. We tried to use things that we would be collecting during the normal course of the school year.
Any questions?
I am also passing out to you, if you could kindly take one and pass it,
I certainly, sir.
a proposed policy change, because what we would like to do is to codify this document through an actual board policy that states this is how the Erie School District will be measuring charter schools moving forward.
Mr. President,
Yes.
if this is something the board is interested in moving forward on, we would also request that we forego calling a policy committee meeting to review this, as it has been presented to the entirety of the board.
No objection, Your Honor.
I'm gonna guess you may have this one ready too?
There's one blank that Mr. Brockman needs to fill in on the third paragraph.
Very efficient tonight, you're on Mr. Watt.
But we already agreed on this, right, Mr. President?
I think we had that conversation already.
We'll kind of agree, like,
We agreed on a basic
a base
framework.
of doing something like
Right.
this.
This is
Correct.
the actual document.
So this
that
is
we're
it, so
proposing.
this policy that we are being asked to approve is basically saying this is the one we're gonna use
Yes.
versus just some
The whole
theoretical.
procedure and everything.
Yes.
Okay,
This, Mr. President,
Yeah.
this framework would be Exhibit A to this policy,
okay.
one of the same.
Okay,
Mr. President?
yes.
So if we're looking at moving the equity work forward too, that we're also doing in the district, would this be an appropriate document to also say that we're going to be looking at their equity within the schools and comparing the equity within our schools? Or is that gonna be like something completely different when we go to look at?
We've had some conversations about that. The issue with trying to compare our schools to the charters is the grade bands are much different. So they have K-8s and we have K-5s and 6 through 8. So we're not sure how comparative that is, because there are different tests that a K-8 takes than a K through 5. So we'll continue that conversation, but initially we were thinking that way, but after we started looking more deeply, we didn't feel that that was going to be appropriate to compare ours internally. We do have, to compare the academics, we do have their SPP scores, which actually the teachers and administrators are rated on, or as far as their evaluations, and the PA Future Ready Index that we can use, as well as our new budget model to make sure that we do have some equity among the buildings.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So basically, we're just, what this is, I mean, just to say it out loud one time, is we're standardizing the evaluation of charter schools that we haven't, that in the past, we were trying to to enforce oversight, but now it's a standardized thing so that all the charter schools know what's to be expected of them, and we can put that out front, and we're being transparent about
And
our
Just
evaluation.
a note on that, this is what RISE suggested to us too.
Well, Rise first brought it out, that Philadelphia had the type thing, I understand,
I think that's important to note.
But this will be for every charter school.
every
Yes.
charter school.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing.
President?
Yes.
We'll note on the upper right-hand corner, it says effective January 2019, that would be January 2020. So we would be looking to adopt this in beginning of next calendar year.
Thank you.
I'm gonna need a new front page on there. I'm gonna need a new front page on there, with the right date.
We'll have a clean copy for you at the board meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody have anything on new business? John?
Question for the solicitor. Please help me understand, define the word defease.
The defeasance resolution is the draft resolution that we had put together for the consideration of paying the bonds off with cash. So to defease the bonds would be to take money, to put it into an escrow account, and it is held until such time that the bonds can be called.
So we aren't technically refunding them because they can't be refunded till 2021.
I believe so.
So we put the $8 million into an escrow account, and there's firms out there that actually calculate how much we need to put in there to cover the debt service payments until they can be officially refunded and still have enough money left over to do the refunding at that point.
And if you look at the next agenda item, that is the engagement letter with FSNL Lutions, which is the entity that we're suggesting you do engage to perform that defeasance calculation to certify the amount of money that is necessary.
You good?
Yeah, I just never heard the word defease.
He always likes throwing his $1.50 words out once in a while. Anybody have anything else?
Real quick, Mr. President.
Yes.
Do we have a student who's gonna be, like, is there a student who's been selected to sit with us next month? Do you know?
I don't know.
Same student,
Is it the same student? Okay.
Jacob Gerline.
Would it be okay if one of us board members just kind of reached out to talk to him prior to just say, you're allowed to talk, or this would be a great thing to say?
I'm gonna point you to do it.
Okay, okay,
Absolutely.
thanks.
Mr. President?
Yes.
6.06, is that where we're voting on the charter?
Oh, I have that question too.
Mr. President?
Yes.
That is a placeholder we put there. We're not sure what resolution we're going to put before you at this moment.
Okay.
But that is a placeholder in the agenda so that we could fill it.
Okay.
6.05 is the evaluation.
You're
we
still
just
working
discussed.
on details, correct?
That is still being finalized.
Yeah.
We are waiting to hear back from Erie Rise.
Right. Anything else? What? Okay. If not, we do have to have, or any other matter before we have to go to executive? If not, I'll take a motion to recess until we get to, I don't need a motion this time? Yeah, recessing.